do you mean? Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, all the evidence suggests that all humans are descended from people that left Africa about 100 to 200,000 years ago.
I agree, but then again, on the BBC One news, they said that
To what, sorry? Okay, now there were Neanderthals.
Right.
Yes, but we're not descended. Okay, no, they're not saying that. I think you've misunderstood what they were saying. It's true that there were two different human species, but both of those species originate from Africa anyway. Okay, but there are Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Okay, now Neanderthals left Africa before Homo sapiens, and they populated Europe. Okay, now.
What colour were they?
I don't know what colour they were, but I would imagine that they started off black and got whiter, depending on where they were.
You have to be careful how you say that.
Black, right?
They would have been, the originals would have been black. I'm pretty confident about that. I'm not certain.
In America, I agree with that.
But let me just finish the point. So the Neanderthals were in Europe before the Homo sapiens were. And the Homo sapiens came along, and the Neanderthals actually just died out. So no one is like directly descended from the Neanderthals. Now, however, having said that, the caveat, there was a little bit of interbreeding. So there are people, the European people, and they have a very small amount of Neanderthal sort of DNA in them. But it's small. There probably was a very little bit of interbreeding.
I agree.
Okay, so the Neanderthal, so the people of recent European origin, some of them have a small amount of Neanderthal DNA in them. However, it's still predominantly Homo sapien, and the differences between them weren't that big. So basically, everyone is a Homo sapien. Some Europeans have a little bit of Neanderthal DNA in them, but it's really not. But basically, the bottom line is the amount of genetic diversity is such that we're all basically the same with the small differences.
So why aren't the 1% not agree with you? You know, change the world, because it's bullying. Like in America, in black communities, it's horrible, man. There's literally no help.
Well, that's a social issue. That's nothing to do with science.
No, but across the whole world, nothing.
Well, they do have a black president in America now, don't they? No, I mean, do you know? All right, hang on. Let me ask you a question. Do you think the I mean, this is a separate question to science, right? But do you think that the well-being of black people as a whole in America has got better from 2014 to, let's say, 1814 in that 200 years, or worse?
In Chicago,
as a whole, you can't pick one place.
There's more dead people in 1 year than in Iraq.
But what's the life expectancy now in 2014 compared to, let's say, 200 years ago?
In 1 year, 11,000 black people were killed, black men.
Okay. I'm just asking you, what's the life expectancy now compared to the past?
Without any colour, in first world countries, second world countries, the life expectancy is great.
Is what, sorry?
It's great.
No, I'm asking you not whether it's good or bad now. I'm asking you.
It's improved.
For
it's improved not only for black people,
everyone.
but it's for everyone. Yeah,
Okay,
that's definitely. And in Asian countries, the life expectation is not so good, but it's now improving. Like the middle class in India is improving, and the life expectation is coming improving. But the rate of kids is decreasing.
Yeah.
Because in Asia, the life expectation is longer. I mean, it's less longer, but the family is bigger. So they die out at a younger age.
I mean, basically, the scientific evidence is that we're all descended from Africans.
Yeah, but it's fair.
And
I agree, but where's the fairness in society?
That's a separate issue, though.
I mean, that's a
social
issue. I mean,
we're talking about genetics and
this is really,
evolution. Brother, what's your name? Sorry, what's your name?
Phil.
Phil.
Yeah.
Phil was saying that we've all basically descended from apes.
Well, we are apes. We are apes.
It's too obvious.
Yeah. I mean, we are just a different species of ape. But what evolution says is that humans and chimps share a common ancestor. Probably lived, we don't know exactly when, probably something between 9 and 5 million years ago. And then we branched out. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
You said a couple of things. One thing you said was that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens could interbreed.
Yes.
So how were they then a separate species?
Well, they basically, because for the most part, they were separated by geography, They probably didn't interbreed as a whole. There were probably some rare exceptions, basically.
But if they could interbreed and have children that could also have offspring, then that would make them, the definition would be that they would be the same species.
It depends on how you define species. I mean, there's no real concrete definition, because what you see in the evolutionary world is there isn't really these very fixed lines. It's a blur. If you define species as cannot interbreed, then you're right. They're separate species and they couldn't have interbred.
So how would you?
But that was what was believed. But now the evidence is that there is some Neanderthal DNA in humans.
So would you say
probably it's probably defined? Maybe you should define it as generally don't rather than cannot. But to be honest, that's the whole point of evolution: is that between species is not these sharp dividing lines, but there's a blur, and it's you know, shades of grey. There isn't these sharp dividing lines. We impose it. We say that's one species and that's another one. But the reality is it's much more messy.
So the thing is, then that becomes, when I then think about the evolutionary process, that becomes problematic.
Why?
Because let's take for example the idea that the common ancestors for chimps and humans. There's got to come a stage when you can say these are distinct species. Now, first of all, you need to define what that is. What do you think a species is?
You know, I don't know. As I say, I think a species is a term that we impose, and I mean, let's put it this way. I can tell you what a tall person is, and I can tell you what a short person is, but that doesn't mean there won't be people that you're not really sure. Do you know what I mean? Someone that's 7 foot tall is definitely tall. Someone that is 3 foot tall is definitely short. But there are other people that, you know, I'm not so sure if they're tall or not. So basically, I think if a species has different what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. Basically, if it looks different enough and they don't interbreed, you can call it a species. But to be honest, I think it's an artificial term.
Yeah, no, but species is an artificial term.
Yeah.
What was the speciation event that led to the separation of the lines of inheritance between humans and chimps?
I don't know, it's not one event. I mean, I think it's very unlikely to be one event. It's a continuum. You know, it's like saying, what's the one height that defines someone as being tall?
No,
it's not one thing. It's a continuum.
So the thing is, if you bring height into it, you're confusing because you're bringing something.
No, I'm trying to demonstrate that there are blurred edges. Yeah?
Well,
that's what I'm trying to say.
So if you can't define what a species is,
well, can you? Okay.
I don't understand how you make.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you can certainly say.
Sorry?
You could say the species concept is irrelevant. You could still say humans. Look, let's put it this way. I can say that you and your. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Okay. I can say you have a common ancestor. Would you agree with that? And your parents, your common ancestor. And I can say you and your cousin have a common ancestor, which is your grandparents. Whether I call you, at which point I say it's a separate species or not, is irrelevant to whether you have a common ancestor. So us and chimps have a common ancestor. Whether you call that, at which point you say that's a separate species, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
What you're doing is you're compounding my confusion, and I'll tell you why that is. Because first of all, my cousin and my ancestors are the same species as me. We can breed and have offspring. You can use that definition of species. But what you're saying is that chimpanzees, for example, and human beings had a common ancestor. Now, there's no. I would argue that there's an overt similarity in appearance, apart from maybe anatomically. And the whole point is, how did this speciation event occur? So you're saying that there's a mechanism, which you call evolution, that led to this dividing of the gene pool, that then led to humans into chimpanzees. Yeah. So I'm asking you about the details of the mechanism that would have led to that. How did it happen?
Well, there's many possible mechanisms. I don't know exactly how it happened between humans and chimps, and I don't need to know. I only need to know whether it happened. For example, one mechanism is geographical separation. So if two populations live even either side of a river that they don't cross, or either side of a mountain range, then their genes don't mix anymore, and they can go on their own sort of separate way. So that is one possibility of how you get a speciation event. But I'm not saying it happened that way. It may have not happened that way. It may have happened another way. But that's certainly one possible way.
Can I say something? Sorry. There is a book, if you go to any library, it's by Dr. Alicia Roberts, and it's called Humanity, the Story of Its Evolution. And it's very, very beautiful because it's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and it shows the very first humanoid, and as you go from page to page, you see the transformation. It's like you are watching a video. There are very specifics, as the evolution happens, and we go through all the intermediary species, there are some very basic important points that happen. For example, the thumbs. The thumbs of the chimpanzees are quite different from that of humans. The way, the dexterity that we can use. For example, it is quite beautiful, and you have to study a lot the genetics, how the genes communicate with the body, and how the body communicates. It is a very specific study, but you need to read anthropology for that. If you are interested, not just to disprove it, but really to study it, then I say, I'm just saying,
As far as facial differences, actually, if you take an African and a Caucasian and you compare the skulls, there's actually very little variation in the skulls. Tiny amounts of variation. So,
because they are both Homo sapiens.
But to show the trend, as you're saying, in the facial, these are assumptions about how the facial structure will
They're not assumptions. I mean, we have found fossils of skeletons that go back 2 million years, and they are finding more and more and more.
And what you see when you look at the fossil record, what you see is that if you plot your skull size over time, what you find is that it's generally increasing. There's a real trend there.
And let me tell you.
You don't agree?
No.
What is the difference between?
I'll show you a plot.
What is the difference between the upright bipedal human, whatever sort of scale structure, and what's the difference in the skull size between that and the primate?
It's tremendous. Let me excuse me. No, wait a minute. Can I answer that? It is not. There is a difference, and the brain is much bigger in the Homo sapiens. And it's very interesting because at one point they look at the genetic changes, because we can study the DNA of all those various fossils, And for example, in order to accommodate a bigger brain, the shape of the mandible and the zygoma here and the muscles attached had to change, because the muscles between the zygoma and finish, they were very, very tight, and they couldn't allow the skull to become bigger. So with time, first of all, the gene information changed, the shape of the mandible changed, and the skull became bigger, and then the brain became bigger. That's all very beautifully documented.
So the thing is, you're talking about a process with an endpoint in mind. And this is not what evolution is.
It doesn't have an endpoint.
Exactly.
It doesn't say,
but it's not a process with an endpoint in mind. So when you're saying that these things change to accommodate the brain, that didn't happen. What happened
did happen. That's the evidence.
No, you just show me a graph on a paper.
Yes.
Right, so
but that's the evidence.
You have to understand it.
Yes. That's not
the assumption is your assumption you're making.
I've never. That's an assumption you made.
Okay,
that's an assumption you made.
What? I didn't. You're not allowing me to talk. I gave you a long time to explain.
Okay.
And now I'm trying to make a point, and you're actually letting me talk.
No, but I'm just precising before you go.
Okay, you're assuming that you know what I'm going to say, and you're preempting it incorrectly. Allow me to speak. Okay. So the first question that I raised with this gentleman is, does he know of this? First of all, he couldn't even define a species. So the argument's moot to start with. The second point was that we were trying to talk about the speciation event that occurred. And I was interested particularly in the genetic mechanisms. That's what I was going to talk about. Going to look on the skull sizes and things, actually there's a marked difference between the brain sizes of human beings and other primates. That makes you feel better. There is a marked difference, as far back as you can go.
That's what we were saying.
And there's a cut-off point, 600 mils. This is the volume of the difference of the intracranial size. Now the graph you're showing me is just a graph.
Now, it's not just a graph, it's a graph with particular important
you're
information.
missing my point. It's just a graph of different skulls showing increasing sizes. The problem that you have is you've got to show that this is not a bipedal upright human being type of skeleton, and these are This is the
How
difference.
does he
Where
know
does that
not to
cutting
cut
point
the
come?
spinal
They're not
cord?
just any old skulls. They're not random skulls that have been found. They're skulls of hominids.
Yes.
And as you go back in time,
it goes back to my
as you go back in time, when you look at the sample of hominid skulls, you find they're getting smaller over time
And 1 centimetre,
into the
2
past.
centimetre, 5 centimetre,
Okay.
10
So that
centimetre.
tells you that there's a change happening.
And with the
There's
size
an
of the
evolution
skull
happening.
changing,
There's
the,
no question
the
about
size
that.
of the shape of the spine changes as well. The shape of the body changes. You know,
So
so
that's
there is
evolution.
an
That's
ongoing.
happening.
You're misunderstanding my point.
Okay.
You're actually misunderstanding my
Okay,
point.
I'm sorry.
Completely.
Please
How
explain
do
what
you
it
know
is.
First, you're making the assumption that I don't accept evolution. That's where you've fallen over already.
Well,
Nobody knew
okay,
about
why
it.
don't you explain
Okay,
your point?
so that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, what's your point?
So my point really is, let's talk about the mechanisms
Now,
that
wash
led to
your
the speciation
hands.
event.
Well, like we already said, we
haven't
don't
said
know
anything at all.
what the mechanism
Exactly.
is.
We don't know.
But hang on. But I've already told you one possible
Because when your
mechanism.
children are this
And
big,
and certainly,
they learn.
whether you know the
Allah
mechanism,
said,
whether something happened,
wash yourself.
does not mean you don't know that it happened. So if I see two people getting married, I don't necessarily know the mechanism of how they met. They might have met on a dating site. No, it's not false. It is. Why is it false?
I'll tell you why it's false.
Go ahead.
Because if you had a fish and a cat in one place together with rings on their fingers, are you going to assume that they're getting married? You don't make assumptions like this.
You
What
did,
you're doing,
well,
you're
saying, so you're saying you can never make an assumption that someone's got married? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not talking about marriage. I told you that the example was false.
Well, but you did. Your reason why is basically ludicrous.
Well, we're talking about speciation, the
Yes.
original ancestors of humans
Right.
and primates.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
And other primates.
That's what I said. Okay, other primates. Are you
are
happy with that? Okay, you're a primate. Good. Now, how did this happen? That's what I'm asking. You're saying there was a separation of the gene pool that led to the division of these two populations. Okay. So how do you account for hominids and other primates in the same environment?
Well, the fact that they're in the same environment doesn't mean that they can't separate. Right? It doesn't mean that at all. Your environment stretches for a very large area. Okay. Let me give you an explanation. Okay. So you look at chimps. Okay. They organise themselves into groups. Okay. They can go. One group can go over here. One group can go over here. They're all in the same environment. But that doesn't in any way mean. Yes, I know. But what I'm saying is that they can separate themselves.
But you're talking about the same species.
Yes, of course. It has to start as the same
Okay,
species,
so
doesn't
now
it?
what I'm saying to you, and you have to understand what I'm saying to you, because you're actually not answering my question. If you have the same species in an environment,
Yes.
the same environment,
Yes.
you need to divide this gene pool, don't you? Yes. You divide this gene pool, and they're still the same species. They can still interbreed.
At first, yeah.
Yes, okay. So you've got to maintain the separation. Okay, for a long time. Is that right? Okay, so there's going to come a point when there's some sort of genetic mutation that then prevents there to be viable offspring. Do you accept that or not? Okay, so if you've got these species in the same environment for a long time, then they can interbreed.
Can you define environment for me?
What environment you
No, but this is key.
Plains of Africa.
Exactly. The plains of Africa are very large. So the fact that they're all on the plains of Africa does not in any way mean that they can't be separated, because it's a very large area.
Of course it does. They can still interbreed.
Right, but just because they can interbreed, that doesn't mean that they do
Are they
interbreed.
subject then to different environmental pressures that's going to be taken into consideration?
They certainly can be.
So that's your argument. So on the same plane,
we do not
on
deny
the same plane,
Yeah.
because we have primates and hominids in Africa in the same environment, subject to the same, pressures from the environment.
But what pressures are they?
Whatever the pressures might be.
Okay, there could be many different pressures. It could be sexual selection, right?
Okay, what's sexual selection?
The females choose males,
Okay.
and they choose males that they like. So one group may have a particular like, and they choose a different group. Okay, so there could be a mutation, and there's a particular troop, and the females like that particular mutation. So you see this in peacocks, for example. Okay, females like large peacock tails, and if you change the size of their peacock tails, the females will mate with them less. Okay, so that can drive. That's an environmental pressure.
I understand what you're saying.
Right. So there are many different possible environmental pressures. Okay, it's not just you're all on the plains of Africa. There are many possible pressures. It could just be that you have a particular, in chimpanzees, you see them have rival troops, and they fight each other, they even go to war against each other. Yeah. So it doesn't. So you can certainly, we certainly see for sure that same species can separate themselves into different groups, even if they're in the same environment or even in the same location.
You have to maintain the separation for.
Yeah, that could be maintained purely by hereditary preferences of females. Can't be.
You're incorrect.
How do you know that?
Because what you're doing is you're taking the same species and say they choose to separate.
Has come from a man.
I'm saying there's lots of different environmental pressures. I don't know what happened. Okay.
Once you prove
But what I'm saying is there are many multiple environmental pressures. Many. And the location,
Environmental pressures do
whatever it says
to
is right.
change the genome.
And whatever I do against it,
I just did give you an example. I gave you two examples. Okay, the first example is geographical separation. Well, what it does is it separates gene pools. Okay? Yes.
in what way?
Okay, well, let's put it this way. Let's suppose you emigrate to Australia, okay, and I stay here, okay, and let's suppose we cannot travel, or even if we can travel, we just choose not to, yeah? Your descendants are not interbreeding with my descendants, okay, so the gene pools are separate.
Let's not even take an artificial, let's take a real example. Take the Australian Aborigines and take the people from Lapland. They've been separated geographically for quite many tens of thousands of years. You can see it even visually. So they led to some hereditary traits. Put them together, instant species.
Yeah, of course, but the
Genetic
separation...
compatibility. So you got physiological changes. Those physiological changes do not necessarily mean genetic changes at all. Okay, so genetic physiological changes. I'm saying that the sun here, I can get dark. You'll get dark as well. For a while.
We're not saying that all changes are genetic.
Yeah, I know. We want to identify genetic changes that actually make
specify that at all.
Do you have any examples of any environmental pressures that actually drive genetic change?
Yes.
For speciation, which?
Well, hang on, for speciation or just genetic change?
No, speciation specifically. There's genetic change all the time. Every time two human beings.
I just told you. Okay, first off, what you said it's the whole point. But what is your point? Because you're kind of beating around the bush. What are you saying?
You've avoided my point.
But what is your point?
My mechanism, the mechanism of the speciation event, that's what I'm talking about, the genetic mechanism. Which you've avoided.
I haven't avoided. I've given you particular examples. How can you say I've avoided it?
Geography is not one. We've got
What do you mean geography?
human beings that inhabit all over the earth.
Okay, but how long has that happened for? Tell me.
What?
How long
Nobody
have
knows
humans...
that.
Yes, we do know. You're wrong.
Go on, tell me.
You're completely wrong. Okay? We know that modern humans, okay, have left Africa, Homo sapiens...
Racist attitude. What evidence do you have that people came out of Africa? Give me the evidence.
Okay, I'll give you the evidence.
Give me some new party, some Western Eurocentric people.
Why
Where's
is
the
it
evidence
racist?
that man came out of
Why is
Africa?
it racist to say
No.
that
You haven't
human
got
beings
any
came from
evidence.
Africa?
This idea of primitiveness. You haven't got any evidence that
What are you
happened.
talking about?
Give me the evidence that they came out of Africa.
Okay, fine. I will give you the evidence. Genetic diversity is high in African populations.
That's the people are the most diverse genetic people in the earth. That doesn't mean that actually people came from Africa. Doesn't mean that at all.
It does.
What does it mean?
Have you looked into Pavlov's theory of genetic inheritance?
Theories, science is not to do with theories, bro.
No, science
it's to do
is
with
to do
facts.
with theories.
There are so many.
Well, you think that theories and facts are different things, but you misunderstand
What's the
science.
difference between theory and fact?
No, what I'm saying is, theories and facts are not... You don't... Okay.
Move on to the point.
No, okay.
Can I ask you a
One
question
thing at a
about
time.
speciation?
But one thing at a time, you keep saying all these different things.
Facts are the same thing.
Okay. What I'm saying is that theories and facts are not rungs on a ladder with facts at the top and theories on the bottom. That's false. Okay? Theories are explanatory frameworks of facts.
Are they?
Yes.
Theories are literally ideas that people have put forward in order to so-called understand reality. Many of them are nonsense, literally fairy tales.
No.
Fairy tales. You know how many theories there are out there? Let's take gravity. You know how many theories there are to gravity? Gravity is a real phenomenon. We all demonstrate it all the time. Do you know how many theories there are to it? Do you know how many?
General relativity is our main theory
Gravity,
of
I said
gravity.
gravity.
Yes,
Relativity?
general relativity is our main
That's
theory of
the
gravity.
theory of gravity. There are
Yes, it is.
three theories of gravity. There's
don't
not the
know what
main.
you're talking
The current theory of folding of space over time, which is not necessarily to do with relativity, it's folding of space time. Just hold on about it for a moment. Relativity is a much bigger, broader subject. The distortion of space-time, this is one theory that was put forward by Einstein. There were two other theories. Do you know what they are?
Well, there's Newton's theory.
Which is?
Newton's theory is different from Einstein's theory.
Yeah, which is what? What is it?
Well, it says that it's that gravity is proportional to mass and inversely, proportional to the square of a distance.
Inversely proportional to the square of the distance between two objects and it's proportional to the product of their mass. There's the third one. Where's the third one?
Well, there's there's Mond.
The third one is gravitons. Actually, there are particles out there called gravitons. They're all mutually exclusive.
They are not
Which one
mutually
of them is-
exclusive. You're wrong.
They're not?
No, you're completely wrong.
I'm completely
You've
wrong.
no idea
Please
what you're
explain to the
talking
camera
about.
the difference between
Sure.
Einstein and Newton.
Okay,
completely wrong.
I would say how you're completely wrong. First off, Einstein's theory incorporates Newton's theory. Okay?
One
Yes.
claims it's a force, the other one
Okay,
claims
so
it's not
first off,
a
in
force,
Einstein's
it's
theory,
actually a folding
in
of space.
Einstein's theory, gravity is still proportional to the square of the distance. It doesn't even change.
It's not a question of a distance.
Okay.
Listen to me for a
Right.
moment. It's not saying there is no force out there. It's actually a folding of space, no force involved.
No, okay, but there's still a field equation. There are still field equations in Einstein.
There are
Okay?
so many. I don't want to be on the camera.
Okay,
I don't know what terrorists out there are
seriously, in Einstein's formulation of general relativity, there are still field equations. It's still treated
There are field equations
as
for
a
magnetism.
field.
For magnetism.
Exactly.
They're not the same thing, brother.
But
Magnetism
they're still
and gravity are not the
fields,
same
aren't
thing.
they?
They're not the same thing. Brother,
Okay,
the
am
point
I
I'm
saying-
making here, theories are ideas. They're not necessarily facts. For any fact, there could be 100 ideas.
No, you don't know what
I
you're talking
don't know why it's organized. Very
Okay.
simple, cheap statements. I'm glad you don't.
Okay, let me try and explain
mean I
it
don't
to
know
you.
what I'm talking
Let me
about?
try and explain your misunderstanding.
Cheap statements.
Okay, well, why don't you let me finish? Why don't you let me finish, and I will correct your misunderstanding. Okay? In Einstein's theory of gravity, it basically incorporates Newton's theory of gravity for almost all cases. The only time where they disagree is in particular cases where curvature is very high and when things are travelling close to the speed of light, and in particular the speed of the mechanism of transmission. So in Newton's theory, gravity is transferred instantaneously, but in Einstein's theory, gravity has to move at the speed of light, and it cannot move faster than the speed of light. But for most cases, that's fine. Okay. Now Einstein's equations of general relativity are field equations. It describes gravity as a field. Now, what a particle is in modern quantum field theory is an excitation of a field. So it's not a contradiction to say that general relativity is true and gravitons exist, because graviton would be the excitation of the field. So they are not contradictory. All of those things, Newton, Einstein, gravitons, can be considered as special cases of each other.
You know what the distinction is between them?
That's the question.
One of them claims is that
What's the situation with Voyager? Where is it now?
with our vertical
Yeah, because we've been chatting that and I didn't know
well,
this
we
guy.
haven't got to that. We haven't got to the corner of the bottom of our argument.
Okay, so
You're now hijacking the conversation somewhere else. There was an original issue.
We know each other. I haven't seen him in a while,
Yeah, I
so I
know.
wanted to ask
So
him.
you're coming to rescue him.
Voyager is
Well, I'm sure he's reached us where he wants to reach with that. Go on.
Voyager is beyond, I think, the magnetic. Basically, the magnetic influence. So it's kind of left the solar system, but the solar system, of course, like other things, doesn't have like one border. You know, it's not like there's one particular line that you cross that you've got. So it's in some sense arbitrary, in the same way that division between species is somewhat arbitrary. But it's, you know, it's certainly gone beyond the sort of main.
Can I jump in here just for a short time? Talking about evolution.
Speciation, we're talking about. Sorry, speciation.
Let me see what he does.
So generally, you don't talk about evolution.
We weren't talking about speciation. But you can make your point. Doesn't matter.
No, I'm just saying, just one aspect of evolution, just one aspect, which makes sense to me. When you look at your childhood picture, you hardly recognize it. I hardly recognize it in a 5-year-old. If that happens in 50 years, shall we say, can you imagine what happens in 500, 5,000, 50,000, 5 million, 5 billion?
Whatever bad you do, whatever bad you have, blame yourself.
Convincing. But there are obviously others.
Because Allah only tells you to do that.
I don't disagree with your statement. I don't disagree with your statement. But that's actually not what we were talking about. We're talking about speciation.
Inshallah.
So it's related.
If you looked at your picture,
Allah makes me
it wouldn't be a picture of a
ideals
fish,
as well.
would it?
It's easy to talk about these things.
Oh, I don't know.
No, it wouldn't. But that's,
If you looked early enough back, you would see an embryo. You would see an embryo, and you would see cells. If you looked early enough, if you looked at the moment you were conceived, you're just looking at a bunch of cells.
The point I was trying to make this
It's not easy.
was that
We have to strive.
I don't have a problem with evolution actually at all.
So do you accept evolution? Let's just answer the question. You do.
My issue actually is with the idea of speciation.
You have enough information.
speciation.
And you have the website.
Become distinct
How you
species
go
from
from one
others.
species to another species.
But you accept that it does happen. But do you accept that it does happen?
What I say to people is this.
But do you accept that speciation does happen? I'm asking you a question. Okay, but I don't understand how those two statements can be consistent. Because you said that you accepted evolution, but you don't accept speciation. But if speciation can't happen, then I don't see how evolution can happen.
And then evolution.
If you can't separate species, however you do, how can you get evolution to happen?
The question is the speciation. That's the question.
Okay, I think I see.
Wait,
that.
no, let's-
I think I get you. Yeah, I get his question. Yeah, I think I get the question, Phil.
Let's look at cows, for example. Farmers have been breeding them for hundreds and hundreds of years to produce more milk. And now they do. They can't survive without the farmers being present, because the farmers need to milk them twice a day, otherwise the others will burst.
It's got to that stage.
Yes, it's got to that stage. So they can't live on the wild on their own anymore. We have bulls now that are bred specifically for greater muscle mass, so they can sell their meat more. So we see evolutionary processes happening. But the cow is still a cow. It never becomes a non-cow. That's speciation. So my question is about the mechanism. Specifically evolutionary mechanism of speciation. And I get these sort of geographical separations.
So you're talking from one sequence to the next, basically.
Exactly what I'm asking.
Okay, something I was listening to All Eyes on Egypt today. They were talking about us being able to actually breathe water, right? Turn it into oxygen, right? And they said, well, one of the evidence that we come from the water was that our hands are webbed. What's your opinion? That's what this is, basically, where they join. They're webbed, basically, right? So that was what they were saying in regards to that. Like we say we're a fish or whatever, would you agree with that or not?
Well, mammals show this.
Having said that, you're believing in
So let me give an example. Mammals show a submersion response. So when you take a mammal and you dip it in water, even a baby, they automatically hold their breath. They automatically hold their breath. And there are physiological changes which allows them to stay in the water for a longer period. So we have these responses. To make the assumption that because we have this ability in water, somehow it means that we originated from water. It may be possible.
I know there was more evidence than that. I'm just going,
I mean, it could be possible.
touching on it. That's all.
Can I just touch on the evidence about fish to mammal evolution? Basically, the theory would make a prediction that you find intermediate forms in particular lakes. So we know when certain species are observed and where others are observed. And so you dig. In fact, when paleontologists go and dig, they don't just dig in random places. They use evolutionary theory to predict where they're going to find certain fossils. So there's a fossil called Tiktaalik. And Tiktaalik was predicted, is an intermediary form between a fish and an amphibian. Okay? And so Tiktaalik was predicted to be found in a particular time. Because, it has to be between the. So they've done where they scientists find those transition layers in rocks, and they found it.
This is my issue with this sort of explanation, because actually it's an explanation of observable events, of observable evidence. So they find a fish, and they find something that's not a fish, and then they find something that looks like it might be in between.
An amphibian, which makes sense. We know an amphibian exists. That we know exists.
Sure.
There's no arguments about that.
It's not talking about an amphibian, but the assumption is then made that this is a stepwise change we see occurring.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, then we have things like whales. So whales are thought to have come onto the land and then gone back into the sea. So they're thought to have evolved onto land and then go back into the sea, which is why they have blowholes and lungs like other mammals do, and they give birth to life.
The argument these guys were saying actually was this actually was all water, and that was why we were fish. We were all fish. So if anything, it's when the land came to being that we changed. That we were all basically.
Yeah, but whale evolution happened way.
No, I wasn't necessarily talking about the whale evolution. I was just saying
I understand that explanation.
Originally, so the argument about Atlantis and whatever, right? What they were saying basically was totally flooded. There was no land mass per se. It was all water.
No, I can appreciate
and it was from that point that we came about the mammals and so on. That was more the argument. It was coming from a different perspective.
So I understand that. So my argument isn't that at all.
Okay.
My argument is about the explanation of the mechanisms of the speciation. And there's about 8 mechanisms. He's mentioned geographical separation. There are others as well. And actually, they're inadequate. These explanations are inadequate.
Okay.
And the reason is this. First of all, no one actually is willing to provide a definition of species that they will stick to. No one's able to do that. Even this gentleman is saying that he's not sure what a species actually is. So I gave the idea that if a species cannot, if one animal that resembles another animal can't interbreed, you could say they were different species. I thought that's a reasonable thing to say. But even then,
I would say they don't interbreed.
Here's something they've said, right? That we are 98% of a banana is us.
Exactly.
Not 98.
No, they said it was 98. No, I saw it on OD.com. It was something like 98%.
It's not right.
It's about 40.
It's about 40 or 50.
No, that's what I would expect, to be honest.
But you might be right with some people.
But even the fact that it's 60% is quite.
But with some people, it might be more. You might be right.
Definitely pretty different from a banana. So
they're as intelligent as bananas, aren't they? I think some people are about as intelligent.
One of the things you would agree, I presume, we're all atoms.
I'm just listening. And
Oh dear. You get upset very easily, don't you?
Yeah, I am. What are you going to do?
No, you're very sensitive.
Thank you very much.
Oh my God.
So do you know these allopatric, parapatric, sympatric speciations are? Can you explain them to me?
There's no need to explain them.
Why is that?
Because you're assuming that I haven't read these and you're testing them.
I would like to know if you've looked into this.
I have, which is why I mentioned
So
there's
what
about
are
8
these
of them.
things?
I've mentioned 8 of them, not 6. There's 8 of them. Look further. Go and Google something else and find 8
Fine,
of
all
them.
right, tell me why you think these
I
can't
wanted
work.
to talk about dark matter. Where we
Give me 5 minutes, right? Tell me why you think these mechanisms can't work. Explain them to me why they can't
So
work.
that's why I've taken the example of the humans and other primates, starting from a common ancestor.
At the same time,
So I'll set that as an example. And let's talk about specifically the genetic mechanisms that lead to the speciation event. Okay. If you assume there isn't a speciation event, there's a continuum. There's a
No,
problem.
he's asking for out and out facts, which he has a point.
This is an issue. If you don't
not a
believe that there's a
major
speciation
point
event.
of argument.
So first, so what is? How do you get evolutionary change? What happens?
Genes change over time.
Random mutations or non-random mutations?
You know the.
Well, as I understand it, mutations are random, but selection is not.
What's the difference? What is selection, by the way? Sorry,
So, okay, I have, let's say I have children, okay? My genes are a combination of mine and my partner's, okay? Those genes shuffle, okay? Some of them mutate. We have something like 100 base pair mutations per generation. Now it's something like 6 billion base pairs.
It's very tiny.
So, yes, of course, for each generation it's tiny, but over many generations it's large.
Maybe you didn't
Okay?
understand the question.
So I know I'm trying to get to it, okay? So that gives you something different, okay? Now, the selection effect is if I'm going to continue my progeny, they have to mate themselves. Okay, so in most cases, a female chooses a male. Okay, that's selection, and it's not just female choosing; that's sexual selection. But you also get obviously environmental selection, i.e., if I die, then I can't reproduce. And even if I live a long life, but no females choose me, then I don't reproduce. Yeah, that's selection. Does that make sense?
No.
It doesn't make
Selection
sense.
is a fiction. Natural selection is a fiction. I'll tell you something. If I was to ask you now, what's the difference between natural selection, survival of the fittest, and variation, which occurs all the time. I'll accept variation. Every time you get two gametes mixing together, you get a flushing, basically, or shuffling of genes. No, please. No on camera. Shuffling of genes. That happens. You have no control of it. You don't know which genes are going to be passed on to the next generation. You have no clue. You've got...
Yeah, but you have traits.
Of course you have traits, but...
Right. And those traits are influenced by genes.
You've got so much variation in just one sperm, one shoot of sperm. I'm not going to go into any
It's not,
graphics here
when
now.
you say it's so
Any
much
ejaculation,
variation, we've just agreed
you've got
that actually
several
even...
million, 200 million roughly sperms that are going to be releasing in ejaculation.
We've
There are
reduced
200 million roughly. Well, I'm not talking about you personally.
Well, it has in London, apparently, hasn't it?
Some people have got higher yield than others, but anyway, we won't go into that.
They had much higher yields back in 1940.
Well, I'm not.
That can be proven.
Speak for yourself, but
Okay,
no,
Superman.
Let's stay on.
that's not the point.
Sorry.
So the point is, this natural selection.
Can't get
sounds
men
very
together
nice.
without talking
Almost
about
sounds magical, by the way, and literally that is what it is.
It's
Natural
not
selection. What is it? What is natural selection?
Natural selection is when natural things select different genes in a gene pool.
There's only
That's
one
it.
natural selection.
Nature has its own.
There's nothing magical about that.
Please.
There's nothing
Frank,
magical
wait
about a
for a moment.
female
Wait a moment.
preferring one male over another one. There's nothing magical about that at all.
That's not at the genetic level.
That's the opposite
That's not
of
the
magic.
genetic level. I promise you this.
No, but they're
Because
not
very-
selecting the genes, they're selecting the traits. And the traits come from the
Don't-
gene.
They do it all the time in horse racing, breeding.
No, there's another little thing to that. There's another little thing
Well,
to
that's
that.
oscillator selection, but it's a similar principle.
When we're talking about this issue about speciation, we're talking about a much deeper issue. Now you can find a very fat, handsome female.
Right, let Imran get back to the...
Yeah, okay, you got it. I'll come back afterwards. I've got some questions.
So we agreed that the evolution was genetic change.
Some women would say like a
occur randomly.
Mutations occur randomly, but of course they're not selected randomly.
They're not reflected.
Yeah,
So there's only one selection pressure, which is death.
a woman could get pregnant for you.
Well, no, that's not true at all. That's absolutely wrong.
How does the gene
Yeah, there's
get
certain
out of the
women
gene
who
pool?
never get pregnant for you. Even
It
though you're
reproduces.
fine. Certain
How
women
does
would
it get
never
out
get
of the gene
pregnant
pool?
for me.
How is it no longer?
So there is a level
What do you mean
of
get
natural
out of the
selection.
gene pool?
When it's no longer in the gene pool, how is that?
Well, the gene could just become defunct. We have that all the time. We see
The
pseudo
individual
genes.
dies, the gene isn't passed on.
Sorry?
The gene isn't passed on.
Our
That's how it
sperm
happens.
would be too acidic or
Right.
something.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I'm
so-
saying is, but you're wrong to say that death is the only form of natural selection, because sexual selection. Let's say I live a long life, but I don't reproduce. Okay, someone else has a short life and they do reproduce. Now, from one's perspective, from my own perspective, if I only care about myself, I'm the fitter, right? But from the perspective of evolution, the one that reproduced but lived a short life is the fitter. Right? So they are more effective in terms of natural selection than I am. I lived a long life and they lived a short life. Right? In fact, we see this in animal species all the time. Many species, have a strategy of reproduction, which is,
That's what it's all about.
die young but reproduce lots.
That's what it's all about.
Well, exactly. But you said that,
So they-
that natural selection only works via death.
The
and that's not case.
genes are only removed from the pool when the genes can no longer be passed on. Death.
Well, yeah, but it's not just death. It's sexual selection as well. But it's not just death that selects.
No, you don't understand what I mean by saying.
Okay.
You have a gene
Explain
pool. That's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter.
not irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. Whatever
It
you're
isn't
saying-
irrelevant.
Yes.
Why is it
Because I'm
irrelevant?
talking about the mechanism specifically. You're talking about something separate.
No, I'm not, because this is a mechanism. Sexual selection is a mechanism.
Let's get. I'm going to ignore that because actually
Why?
it's irrelevant to my point I'm trying to make.
It's not irrelevant.
So you want me to talk about natural selection as opposed to speciation, which I've been trying to talk to you about from the beginning of the discussion.
Okay, but they're related. They're not completely separate things, are they? They're not like totally different categories. I don't understand.
Well, yeah, we can talk about Manchester United or Liverpool. I'm trying to talk about Liverpool. You want to talk about Manchester United? Essentially, is what's happening.
They're both football.
Yes.
Right, we're going to talk about football.
But that's the whole
I mean,
point.
They play each other.
That's the whole point.
Exactly,
I
that
want
is
to
the whole
talk
point.
about specifically something, and you don't seem to be sticking to that topic.
No, because they're related topics. They are not separate topics. Simple as that.
Do you want to
If you can't have speciation, you can't have
that's what I'm talking to you about.
evolution.
No, it's the other way around.
No, it isn't.
When have you seen speciation?
When have I personally
Yeah.
seen it? I don't see
Absolutely.
species.
Have you seen
but plenty of people who research this have seen it.
So in
Okay, and go and look up. You can look up
No,
incidents
that's
of
the
speciation.
whole point. You've got the cart before the horse.
I've never seen one
You've
single
got
one.
the
I've
cart
been
before the
chasing it
horse.
very carefully.
Evolution, I have no issue with. Variation within the species, I have no issue with. What we're talking about is speciation specifically, which is why I'm trying to get you back to that even now.
I'm still trying to get out my dark matter.
So when you, and dark matter is very interesting.
How much time do we have?
Go on, give him the number 5.
All right, 10 to 8.
10
to 8.
All right, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock.
Because I have to go
Right.
in about 15
So I want
minutes.
to schedule.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, mutations happen on a random basis, is that right?
As far as I understand it, yes.
Okay. So if they're random, do you get the same mutation in 2 individuals or 1 individual?
Well,
Do you get field changes or specific changes to an individual?
a particular point mutation would be particular to a particular individual.
Okay. And what happens to that individual? What happens to that,
Well,
that change within the individual?
most mutations, as I understand it, are neutral. They don't do anything at all.
They're corrected very quickly, actually. They happen all the time.
No, they wouldn't be corrected
They are
because they're
corrected
neutral.
all
If they're
the-
neutral, how can they be corrected?
all the time. The human body doesn't allow it. At any one time,
No, that
every
doesn't-
day,
what you're saying doesn't even
there
make
are thousands
sense.
of mutations happening in your body right now, and they will be corrected.
No,
They will
if
be.
they're neutral. All right, tell me the mechanism.
I'll let you
No,
finish.
hang on.
I'll
Tell
go
me
on.
the mechanism of
You've got 15
correction.
minutes. You finish with
Well, actually, there's many mechanisms of correction, but let's get back to the point. So these are random mutations in an individual. They don't occur like a field change. You don't get the same mutation occurring in many individuals.
I wouldn't have thought so.
Okay. Now, if you've got, at what stage do you need to? How much mutations do you need to accumulate to allow you to be different from anyone else in the individual in that population, any other individual?
Well, it depends what you mean by different.
Different, so that you recognise as a separate species.
I don't know. I mean, it could be quite small, possibly.
It could be.
It could be quite a small mutation. Probably is.
So I'm talking about speciation event mutations. Is it?
No, but that's the whole point. You have this thing, or it appears to me, that you have this conception of speciation. It's like this one event that happens, in a very rapid period of time.
No, I never said that at all.
No, but it seems to me that what your line of argument is implying that.
It's not.
Okay? Well, the problem is that what I am suggesting is that speciation happens not in this one moment, but gradually. So there may be not just one thing that happens, it can be a chain of things.
So you're saying that that mutation in an individual would be propagated then, if it wasn't selected against, it would be propagated.
It could be, yes. As you've heard of genetic drift, I believe.
Yes,
Right.
so it would be propagated within that population. Yeah?
It could be, it may or may not be.
So the only way to then, we'll go back to our point about the geographical separation.
Yeah.
The only way to ensure that these two same species, with a similar genetic pool initially, keep their mutations and go off into separate genetic paths, they stay isolated. Is that right?
I wouldn't have thought it's the only... Well, it depends what you mean by isolated. Are you talking geographically isolated?
Genetically isolated.
Genetically
however you
isolated.
want to...
Genetically isolated, I would have thought so,
Yeah. It has to be some sort of natural barrier. Is that right?
Some sort of barrier, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then what you'd have is over maybe 20, 30, 100 generations, there would be enough changes maybe accumulated, maybe even more, longer.
Yeah.
But then when these two species then mate afterwards, they can't produce viable offspring.
They can't...
Produce viable offspring.
Well, you could define it as simply they don't produce violence rather than they can't. So, for example, you could have two populations that can create offspring but just don't, so they just drift apart. So See what I mean?
But if they could produce...
So they could, but they don't, and then eventually they can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when they could, they still would be regarded as being the same species.
As I say, it depends on how you define species. You could define it.
This is
You
our-
could
this is our
define
main
it.
problem.
No, but it doesn't
You
matter.
can't define a species.
It doesn't matter because, as I say, you could define it as don't, or you could define it as can't, and they are two different things. But they're both potential ways to define a species.
If you can't, then that's a separate species. If they don't but can, that's not a separate species.
Well, that's your definition. I'm not sure that's universally agreed upon.
So if Aborigines can mate with another type of different looking human, even though they've been separated geographically for hundreds of thousands of years, you say they're the same species? Or would you say that they might not be the same species?
Again, it depends on how you define a species. But personally...
Well, this is ridiculous, really.
No, it's not. It's not. Because the whole point of evolution...
First you said the Neanderthals and other hominids were not different species because they could interbreed. And now you're saying, that Aborigines and people from Lapland maybe could be this different species.
Okay.
I mean, this is bizarre.
No, it's not bizarre. This is completely and utterly consistent with evolution.
It's not at all.
No, it is. Let me try and explain why, okay? And then I have to go and ask this first question, okay? The reason why is that evolution tells you that organisms are this very gradual continuum with each other. They're not all separated into these easily defined boxes. So what you classify as a separate species is just, it's not about what's going on in the world, it's about your labelling. And can you label easily? Just as, and the analogy that I had between tall and short people is not irrelevant, it's extremely relevant because it's the difference between something being a continuum and something being discrete. So the fact is that some things are discrete and some things are a continuum. And the way that species work is that they appear to be more of a continuum rather than discrete boxes. So it's not so, if evolution is true, and we're all descending from common ancestors and then branching out, then it's not so easy to define species. This is the whole point. This is in fact what Darwin said was that it's a smooth gradation, and the labels that we come up with as species are just human constructs.
No, there's a problem though, because actually we say that everything's, we say all sorts of things are species. We do that all the time.
People do
Cats,
that,
cats
yes.
and dogs are a different species.
People do say that, yes.
Tigers and leopards are different species, but they exist in the same environment.
Yes.
So my question, which goes, they do. So my question was, what led to the separation of the gene pools?
Well, many things could have led to the separation of the gene pools.
The problem is that we have many creatures in the same environment that appear to have the same common ancestor. They would all have to be separated for ages, geographically, to allow...
What do you mean by ages? Because let's define specifically what we mean.
Whatever, 100,000 years, 200,000 years, whatever you want to.
Nobody wants.
Whatever makes you happy.
Guess what?
They would have to be separated.
But whatever is consistent with the data, I think, would be a better.
Whatever if you want to get down to the specifics, look at the rate.
That's really stretching it.
Theories of dating, genetic changes. Wow, some people have some.
Plot the graph and then whatever that time is.
Yeah.
So the rates and the time that you can work it out.
Yeah.
But
And people have done that. And no one in the scientific community thinks that this can't happen.
What?
So
you know how many people
your
dispute
personal incredulity. It's
You know how many people dispute these dates in terms of genetic mutational traits and how many?
Well, you're trying to tell me there's not a consistency.
There is no, people have been making nonsense, absolutely. There are two types of scientists out there. There are the abstract lot and there are the empiricists. The empiricists will have a laugh at some of the ideas that are being brought out. Science is not about ideas.
Have you actually
it's not about
read the
ideas, it's about
scientific
facts.
literature on this subject?
Brother, I've been studying science all my life and teaching it. Wait,
Okay.
before you get your iPad out, don't hide into Google. I could give you 100 articles counting it.
I've got the fucking
Don't
paper
bring it.
here.
I don't need to use the F word.
okay, no,
You don't need to use the F word.
Tell me,
You know
have you
what
read this?
I haven't read it, and I promise you, I've written articles I haven't read.
Of course
It's
not.
irrelevant. Irrelevant. There are how many?
It's not
It's what you
irrelevant.
can prove.
It's not irrelevant.
Absolutely irrelevant. Science is not about
Let me
writing.
just read you
It's
from
about
the
facts.
sequence. This
Facts
is
that can be
from the
demonstrated.
Sequence Consortium of the consortium that sequenced the chimp genome and compare it to the human genome. This is the genomic institutes of all the top institutes in the world collaborated and wrote this paper. And let me finish up. I'm going to quote you this, and then I'm going to ask this gentleman.
No, you need to do
And then
a
I need to go.
particular question
Okay?
that you dealt with.
Right.
Man. I just wanna,
Okay, it says more than a century ago. This is for what Nature. This is published. This is the Chimp Genome Consortium. Okay, more than a century ago, Darwin and Huxley posited that humans share recent common ancestors with African great apes. modern molecular studies have spectacularly confirmed this prediction.
Confirmed what? Confirmed what?
Confirmed that humans and chimps share a common ancestor.
Oh my God, this is an absolute joke. You are recording the test with
I've
you haven't got a clue what
asked
science
this
is.
question.
No, listen. No, yeah, you got my question. One question. It's about something you mentioned now.
About an hour chat.
You're talking about continuity.
One last question.
It's not about ideas, it's about facts. Oh my God, this is an outrage.
Well, he couldn't define a
talking about
species.
evolution,
so if you can't
continuity.
define a species, you can't actually have a discussion on
Things
evolution,
that are
speciation.
discrete. It's not about ideas. The facts of nature dictate what we should conclude. And species out there are actually not continuous. They are discrete, and literally that is the case why a human being cannot mate with a chimpanzee because of genetic compatibility.
Well,
Doesn't matter how you do
he
it.
said that
What's the position you
Neanderthals
choose?
and other humans were the same species. That's what
That's
he said.
absolute lie.
They wouldn't define a species.
They would not define the species. Is not defined based on our particular perspective. It's based on genetic compatibility. Period. Sometimes it's not even phenotype changes. Even looks actually do not define species. Actually genetic compatibility. Sometimes I could get the two birds that look very distinct. Even the peacock that I was talking about. If you look at the female and the male, you think they're two different species.
But the problem is there was too many conversations happening.
Yeah, I understand, but
continuity.
Unfortunately, it's always speculation and sensationalism, and that's what they hide behind. No facts, always.
Next time, we'll get him next time.
Next time, let me pin him down.